Would you like to be able to select any object regardless of the shape it has? Well, after this video, it's going to be a piece of cake. Howdy all, in today's rather thorough video, we're going to be going into the selection tools and how you can choose and select any kind of object regardless of what shape it has, if it's round or if it's a square, etc. Let's get to it. All right, I'm already in the editor module with the photos open and we're ready to check out how the selection tools work. Now, selection tools are useful for creating masks, doing local adjustments on a specific layer, and also for copying a part of an image to a new layer. So let's take a look at all the tools we have available to us. The selection tools are found by clicking on this handy dandy icon right here. Let's start with the first one, the rectangular selection. Now, it's perfect, of course, for selecting rectangular or square-shaped objects. You can also choose rectangular selection using the keyboard shortcut M. Since the Rubik's Cube has square shapes, let's press the Shift key to get an aspect ratio of 1:1, making the rectangle a nice square. Holding the Control key, this will make a point where we clicked at the center of our selection, and since we want a square, let's hold both Control and Shift, as both functions work well together. Select the middle square, and now there you have it, we got a square selection. If you want to adjust its colors, click on Adjustments and then Enhance Colors. All right, let's change one square's color. Under the selection tools, you'll also find the blur function, which determines how sharp the edge of a selection will be. A higher value naturally equals a smoother transition, and it's important to be careful because if the blur is a bit too high, it rounds the sharp edges and you lose your accuracy and where you wanted the selection to be. Let's increase the blur and insert a rectangle. The edge of the selection, marked by what is known as marching ants, has been rounded off. And if I turn on Selection Display, found right here at the top next to the histogram, you can see the selection is blurred at the edges. And just because an object is selected with marching ants doesn't mean it's actually selected as we intended to. The marching ants only indicate an area that is more than 50% selected. And this is easier to see if I turn on the black and white selection display. Now you can see that the rectangle is not all white and that the selection goes a bit past the marching ants. If we unselect, reduce the blur, and reinsert the rectangle, when we enable black and white selection display, notice the selection is all white now with sharp edges. All right, next we can use the Selection All option to select the entire photo. And you can also do this by pressing Control A. And then there's the Deselect button, which of course cancels the selection, or if all fails, you can press the Escape key. You can use Invert Selection to select the exact inverse of what you selected as well. Okay, click on Cover Selection, and if we want to invert, the display shows this here. It's important to mention that all the selection tools can be used together, so you can use multiple tools to select more complex objects. Now I open a photo with round shapes. Let's say something like fruit, because we're going to demonstrate the elliptical selection. You can always use the keyboard shortcut O. And with elliptical selection, the Control and Shift key work exactly the same as they did with the rectangular selection. Now I'm going to increase the blur slightly because we don't want any sharp edges at this point. And I'm going to use the Control key to choose the center and then select this sliced open grapefruit. The selection includes a piece of raspberry as well as blackberry, which we need to remove. There are multiple options for removing it from this selection. I can press Control, which automatically enables Remove from Selection, and it is indicated by the red minus sign that appears right here next to the cursor. And now I just drag to remove the raspberry. Or I can click Remove from Selection and remove this part of the blackberry at the bottom. If you prefer to select from the center, there's that option as well. It doesn't work in the normal mode because you can't use the control key 2 ways at once. So in remove from selection mode, I click the photo and then press Control to select from center once again. Now, if that was a little bit confusing, let's summarize using Control. If you want to remove from selection, press Control and then click the photo. If you want to select from center, first click and then press Control. Now I use the selection brush to fine-tune this selection. Let's choose remove from selection and remove the areas that we just simply don't need. All right, now use the shift to switch to add to selection and add the sides of the grapefruit. Let's imagine that we wanted to add this raspberry to the grapefruit. To do that, we'll choose the elliptical selection and change the mode to add to selection. Click the photo and press Control to select from center and drag. Again, let's use the brush to remove any unwanted areas. And besides normal, add to selection and remove from selection modes, there's also intersection mode. Now, intersection mode only selects a part where 2 selections overlap. For example, right here. We're now going to look at the lasso tool, which you can also access with the keyboard shortcut L. We're not going to go too in-depth into this one because you can select most things very precisely with other tools. However, if you're working on a graphics drawing tablet, the freedom of the lasso tool might come in handy. Let's go check out some of the other tools. One of those handy tools is the Polygon-Lasso, which you can access using the N key. The Polygon-Lasso selects using segments, so it's ideal to choose a shape that has straight edges and not very many rounded edges, like houses or cars. Okay, click on Add More Segments until we have the entire building selected. It's a good idea to add selection to a mask so I can continue working on it. Now, for example, I can adjust its exposure. You can learn how to adjust exposure of a selection in a mask in the first part of the photo montage series we did, and you'll find a link at the top of this video. Next, we'll take a look at the magnetic lasso. Now, this tool is very interesting and useful because we can use it to select almost any object as long as it has clearly defined edges. And we can select it using the A key. The magnetic lasso selects by attaching to contrasting edges. Now let's click the mouse to add more parts to the selection. And if you go outside the lines, just like I did here, undo using delete or backspace, which also works for the Polygon-Lasso. In the case that a part of an object is not clearly defined, the magnetic lasso may have trouble selecting what you want. Like right here in this dark spot, for example. But we can fix this by pressing the Alt key and switching to the Polygon-Lasso. Select the problem area again using segments. And this also works if you're working with the Polygon-Lasso and select a section using the magnetic lasso. All right, our QE is selected. All right, the second to last tool is the magic wand, and we can access it using the keyboard shortcut W. It's perfect for selecting backgrounds. The magic wand selects a colored area similar to the point of selection and similar in brightness across the color spectrum to the selection. For example, if I click the background right here with the RGB matching mode, only the white part of the background is going to be selected. However, if I switch to the brightness mode, it also selected a part of the melon that has areas similar in brightness to my white background. So let's go back to RGB. You can further fine-tune your magic wand selection using tolerance. The higher the tolerance, the more the wand will tolerate colors and points of different colors as well as brightness than from the original starting point. So to put that in example, let's set the tolerance to 10 and notice how it only selects a certain part. And then when we increase it to 70, it's gonna select a much larger area. Of course, if we overdo it and set it to 150, it's going to select part of the melon as well. So you might notice that there's another setting here, continuous. And if you have the continuous box checked, the wand's only going to select the area where you clicked. Now, if we disable this function and click the background we want to select, the wand is going to select a small part of the watermelon as well. Now, let's leave the continuous setting checked and select the background. I'm only going to use the brush to fine-tune my selection. Now, instead of the background, let's edit the watermelon. Click on invert selection and the watermelon is going to be selected instead of the background. Now we can adjust its color. Click on adjustments and select enhance colors. Let's also disable selection display so we can see the color adjustments. And my watermelon is now red. The last tool is the selection brush. You can open it by using Shift and Q, and it's perfect for making detailed adjustments to your selection. It uses the functions diameter, density, blur, and spacing. And you can choose these brush settings like you would for any ordinary brush. I'll demonstrate how it works on these pairs right here. First, let's select them using the Magnetic Lasso. And the pairs are very dark right down here, so I've selected them as best as I can because I know I need to refine the selection using the selection brush for this particular area. Okay, let's enable selection display and choose cover unselected. Using the brush, I'm gonna try and remove unwanted parts from the selection as precisely as possible. Now you need to be careful when changing the brush size because changing the diameter also proportionately reduces the blur. If we make the brush smaller, we need to increase the blur just a bit so that parts of the selection are not sharper than the other ones. The last setting is refine selection. This function includes radius, contrast, and smoothing. Refine selection is perfect for selecting hair or animal fur, for example. And we'll get into more detail on this in our next video. Now I'm gonna switch the display over to cover selection just to see if we're missing anything. And our selection is done. I hope this video helped you in that now you can select any object you want regardless of its shape. If you liked the video, give us a thumbs up, let us know what you think below, and I will see you in the next video. See ya.